The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, buried between newsletters and spam. Subject line: Kelris Analytics Product Launch Luncheon. RSVP requested. I almost deleted it, assuming it was just another tech-forward press blast. But the sender caught my eye. Kellen Vane, my son. It was brief, transactional. Dear Ms. Vane, we're hosting a small luncheon this Friday to celebrate the launch of our newest platform. You are welcome to join. No hi, Mom, no warmth. Just logistics. Like I was one of 100 names copied from a list. I reread it 3 times. Maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe not. I sat back in my chair watching the light flicker against the garden glass. For years, I had remained behind the curtain, never asking to be acknowledged. When he founded Kelris, I let him have the spotlight, the credit, the glory. I was proud. I still am. But this invitation didn't feel like gratitude. It felt like an obligation. I nearly declined. I typed, "Thank you," and paused. Then I closed the laptop. Friday morning came. I chose a soft gray pantsuit and my smallest pearl studs. Elegant, forgettable, neutral enough to blend in, sharp enough to hold ground. I slipped into low heels and reached for the fountain pen on my desk. It was the one Kellen gave me when he was 16, engraved with the words, "To the best boss ever." Funny. Back then he said I was unstoppable. The drive into Boston felt longer than usual. Or perhaps I was simply more aware of time now. I parked across from the venue, some rooftop fusion place I'd never heard of, and took a deep breath. I smoothed my lapels, capped the pen, and tucked it into my bag, like armor. At the front desk, the hostess glanced at the guest list, then up at me. "You're with Kelris?" she asked, surprised. I nodded, smiling. "Yes, Ms. Vane." She led me through polished glass doors into a room pulsing with laughter, clinking cutlery, and a table where my son sat at the center, surrounded by strangers who didn't know my name. They placed me at the far end of the table, next to a nervous-looking intern who kept adjusting her napkin. I didn't mind. I've never needed the center seat to feel grounded, but it was telling how no one introduced me, not even Kellen. He was animated, basking in attention. The room orbited him like planets circling their sun. His voice had deepened since college, more polished now, like someone trained by investors and pitch decks. I watched as he threw an arm around the shoulders of his COO, grinned at the marketing lead, and gestured to the table full of suits I didn't recognize. He raised his glass. "Here's to building something out of nothing," he said. 2 years ago, we were running on ramen and Red Bull, and now look at us, applause. Clinking glasses. Pride shimmered across every face. I offered a small smile, then softly added, "Well, not quite nothing." Kellen's head turned sharply. "What's that? Mom?" His voice was still playful, but there was a tightness behind it. I met his eyes. Just that it wasn't quite nothing. "You had a little help at the start, remember?" The moment held. Then he laughed. Loud, dismissive. "Mom, you're nothing here? This is my world now." They laughed with him. It was the kind of laughter that didn't sting immediately. It settled slowly, like dust on an old photograph. I looked around the table. No one questioned him. No one hesitated. Even the intern beside me chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to side with the room or her conscience. I said nothing, just nodded, reached for my water, and folded my hands neatly in my lap. My pulse didn't rise. I'd been underestimated before by boardrooms, by analysts, by men who mistook quiet for weak. I looked at Kellen again, radiant in his success, unaware of the foundation beneath his feet. The pen in my bag felt heavier now. Not like armor anymore, like a key. After Leant died, I sold our brownstone in Cambridge and moved into something quieter near the edge of Belmont. The market was soft, but I wasn't selling for gain. I was searching for stillness. I left behind public speaking engagements industry panels and the fast-talking world of venture capital. People assumed I retired. I didn't correct them. I was still investing, just not in headlines. Kellen came to me 2 years later, hollow-eyed and earnest. The pitch deck he brought was laughably rough, but his voice determined. A boy trying to prove he was a man. The banks said no. His father's old contacts never returned his calls. Just enough to get us to the prototype, he pleaded. I know I can make this work. I told him I'd back him, but only if he let me do it from the shadows. No one will take me seriously if they know my mom funded it. He'd said, trying to sound detached. I understood. Ego needs room to grow. I asked my lawyer to draft the agreement. Silver Point Holdings was already active, a structure I'd used before. We routed the capital through it, clean, quiet, entirely legal. 62%. The documents were signed in my dining room. Kellen, too distracted by excitement to read the fine print. I just want a chance, he told me, holding the check with both hands. I'm giving you more than that, I said. I'm giving you silence. And I kept my word. I never asked for public credit. I never sat in on team calls. I let him build his empire with a narrative that suited him. But narratives are fragile things. Now, as I watched him bask in borrowed light, I realized he had forgotten the hand that lit the first match. And I remembered something else too. Ghosts don't stay quiet forever. The dessert menu arrived with fanfare plates of brulee and ganache, passed down like celebratory trophies. Kellen leaned back, glowing under the dim chandelier light, riding the high of his own myth. I stirred my espresso slowly, letting the silence between bites wrap itself around me. Across the table, a young woman glanced over with cautious curiosity. Her name tag read Sonia, and her blazer sleeves were slightly too long. She looked barely 24, eager, sharp, still deciding when it was safe to speak. She leaned in slightly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle. "I was just wondering. How do you know Mr. Vane?" The fork in the VP's hand paused. A spoon clinked against porcelain. I smiled. Not tight, not forced. Calm. "I'm the woman who wrote his first check." There it was. The room shifted, subtle but undeniable. The laughter that had echoed so freely minutes earlier disappeared into breathless quiet. I reached into my purse, not rushed, just deliberate, and pulled out the slim navy folder I'd packed that morning. I laid it on the tablecloth with a soft thump, unlatched it, opened to the first page. Trust formation documents, funding transfers, proof of equity, all bearing my name, all signed, notarized, sealed. I didn't say another word. A fork slipped from someone's hand. The VP across from me blinked twice, then leaned closer. Kellen didn't move. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. His face had lost color. No one laughed now. The marketing lead tilted her head, eyes scanning the page as if trying to rewrite the story in her head. Kellen finally cleared his throat. Why would you bring this here?" he said, voice lower. Strained. I met his gaze with something even quieter than defiance. "You brought me here, Kellen. I just decided to show up as myself." Then I closed the folder, tucked it back into my purse, and folded my napkin. The silence held like a breath no one wanted to exhale. And when the check arrived, no one reached for it but me. He arrived without calling, the same way he used to burst through the front door in high school when he forgot his keys. Only now he didn't knock. He barged in like a man trying to reclaim something he thought he owned. "Why would you ambush me like that?" Kellen's voice cracked through the air like a whip. I was folding linens in the dining room, the same set I'd used the day he signed those funding documents. I didn't flinch. "I didn't ambush you," I said, smoothing a crease. I introduced myself. He paced the room with the clumsy energy of someone used to being the loudest in it. "You embarrassed me. You undermined me in front of my entire team." I turned and looked at him fully. No, Kellen. You did that all by yourself. I simply corrected the story. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I walked over to the console by the window, retrieved a small envelope, and held it out. This is a formal notice. I'll be exercising my voting rights moving forward. His brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means, I said gently, you don't get to pretend I don't exist anymore. He didn't take the envelope. He just stared at it, as if it were written in a language he'd never learned. Maybe it was. Accountability often is. You forgot the hand that built the chair you're sitting in. Kellen, I added. Time I pulled it back. He left without another word. The next morning, the board secretary received an updated list of voting participants. Under the primary investor block, a name appeared for the first time since the company's inception, S. Vane, majority equity holder. By noon, the CFO had scheduled a one-on-one. By evening, my inbox held 3 new meeting invites and 1 calendar placeholder titled Executive Oversight Q1. I accepted all of them. And then I wrote a short note to someone who had once poured me coffee with trembling hands. Her name was Clarabelle. Clarabelle showed up to the cafe 10 minutes early, shoulders drawn tight, blazer wrinkled at the elbow. She looked as if she expected a reprimand, not a meeting. Thank you for agreeing to meet, I said, waving her over. She hesitated before sitting, as if unsure she'd been seen correctly. I wasn't sure if this was work-related, she said, voice low. It's not, I replied. It's personal and overdue. We talked for over an hour about company bottlenecks, executive bottling, and all the small moments when her voice had been drowned out in meetings she organized, but was never invited to speak in. She had clear insight, a razor-sharp mind, and an instinct for systems. And yet Kellen had her fetching dry cleaning and managing his travel apps. When she finally took a sip of her now cold tea, I asked Clarabelle, would you like to learn what true leadership looks like? Her eyes lifted. She studied me with a wariness I recognized, one I had worn for years. I would, she said carefully. But I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. I handed her a slim manila envelope. Inside were transfer documents, 10% of my equity placed in proxy under her name. With it came access to board agendas, executive reports, and a voice no one could mute. She stared at the folder like it might burn her fingers. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't need to, I said. You just need to show up to the next meeting and be yourself. The next Thursday, Clarabelle walked into the Kellrise boardroom in a sharp black dress, hair pulled back, holding the same folder under her arm. Kellen did a double take when he saw her name on the attendance list. His mouth opened, then shut. She sat beside me, and when the CFO began his quarterly summary, Clarabelle raised one hand, calm and steady. I have a few questions about the compliance lag from Q2, she said. Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't need to. And the look Kellen gave her, it was the same one he used to give me when he still remembered who taught him how to lead. The conference room was colder than usual. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the quiet ripple of uncertainty when Clarabelle and I walked in together side by side. Kellen was already seated at the head of the long glass table, flanked by his COO, a former consultant with too many buzzwords and too little backbone. His expression tightened when he saw us. He stood out of habit, but didn't speak. Ms. Mendoza, the COO, began nervously. We weren't expecting you today. Clarabelle didn't flinch. I'm listed under the Vane block now, she said, pulling out her seat. You'll want to update your assumptions. The meeting began with financials. The numbers were solid, but not clean. Clarabelle pointed first, calm and meticulous, to a series of line items buried in Q3 expenditures. Redundancies in vendor contracts, bloated travel reimbursements, performance bonuses paid out before benchmarks. I flagged these 2 weeks ago, she said. There's no paper trail on approvals. A few board members shifted in their seats. Kellen shot a glance at the COO, who stammered something about delegated authority. Clarabelle nodded. Delegation isn't exemption. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. I'd like to propose a new clause, I said, laying out a one-page draft. Executive bonuses must be tied to reviewed quarterly milestones and subject to a 2-tier board review. Kellen leaned forward. That's dramatic. No, I said gently. That's grown up. He blinked. Kell Rise has grown, I continued, and so has its accountability. The room was still. No one objected. No one dared. I watched as Kellen swallowed whatever protest had reached his throat. There was no tantrum, no eruption, just a dawning awareness in his eyes, the slow recognition that power didn't always shout. Sometimes it arrived with documents and data, and a woman who no longer asked for permission. The motion passed. Clarabelle recorded the minutes. And when the meeting adjourned, Kellen didn't look at me as he left. But I saw something in his posture shoulders, not just tense, but unsure. He knew the story was changing. And I knew it was finally mine to write. He chose a quiet cafe tucked into a side street, the kind of place with mismatched mugs and chipped tile floors. I was already seated when he arrived. 10 minutes late. Eyes shadowed collar, slightly wrinkled. He looked less like a CEO and more like a boy who hadn't slept. He didn't say hello. Just slid into the chair across from me and exhaled. You could have told me, he said finally. I stirred my tea. You didn't ask. He shook his head, half laughing. You don't get how this looks, do you? Everyone thinks I've been lying, that I built this on sand. I didn't reply. The truth didn't need defending. He ran a hand through his hair. This was supposed to be clean. It's been a bad quarter. The investor calls are brutal, and now I have to explain why my mother has board authority. I'm not your crisis, I said, soft but clear. I'm your foundation. His jaw tightened. It's just a lot. I nodded. Stress reveals structure. He looked away out the window. I could see the questions he wasn't asking. Why now? Why like this? But deeper still. I saw the fear of not being in control, of having to answer to someone he thought was safely tucked into the past. I didn't come here to punish you. Kellen, I said. But I won't protect you from yourself either. I reached into my bag and slid a folded paper across the table. A list. Short. Precise. These are suggestions, I said. Implementing an independent ethics officer, regular audits on discretionary spending, and a real succession strategy, not one scribbled on a bar napkin. He scanned the page, then looked up. Is this an ultimatum? No, I said. It's an invitation. We sat in silence for a moment longer. He didn't thank me. But he didn't walk out either. When he finally left, I stayed behind, watching the swirl of steam rise from my untouched tea. That evening, my inbox dinged with a meeting request from Clarabelle. Subject line, next steps. Clarabelle's promotion was quiet, but decisive. No balloons, no announcement banners, just a new line on the company's organizational chart and a ripple of respect that moved through the building like a shifting tide. Within 2 weeks, departments once clogged by indecision were flowing smoothly. Contracts were reviewed with care. Expense reports no longer disappeared into black holes. Investors noticed. One even said, during the quarterly review call, there's a maturity in leadership now. A clarity we hadn't seen before. I didn't speak during that call. I simply listened. My screen muted, my camera off. I had no interest in applause. I'd had enough of that in my former life. Clarabelle met with me weekly now, not to ask for permission, but to discuss strategy. She was growing into herself, and I could see the weight she once carried of being underestimated falling away. One afternoon, I was approached by a reporter after a minor tech conference. Young, polished, slightly overeager. Ms. Vane, she said, recorder in hand, do you mind if I ask about your role in Kelreese? People are curious. You've remained so quiet for so long." I smiled just enough. Let's just say I told her Kelreese didn't start from nothing. It started with something. And someone. She blinked, unsure how to follow up. I left it there. Later that evening, as I settled into my chair by the window, my phone lit up. A message. From Sonia, the intern, who'd asked me that simple, honest question at the luncheon. "I just wanted to thank you for showing what strength looks like. I didn't know women could lead like that quietly, but completely." I reread it twice, then turned the screen over and let the message settle in my chest. Not everything needs a spotlight. Sometimes legacy is the space you leave behind, wider, clearer for others to step into with both feet. And sometimes it's a quiet garden, waiting for someone to return. The air was just beginning to shift, that quiet cooling that comes before fall settles in. I was in the garden, trimming back the late bloomers' roses that refused to give up their color, even as the season told them to rest. Their stubbornness made me smile. Each cut was deliberate, patient. I thought of Leon, the way he used to hold the clippers wrong, always nicking the stems too low. I thought of boardrooms filled with suits who never saw me coming. And I thought of the silence I'd carried for years, not as a burden, but as a tool. A silence I finally laid down when it no longer served me. I didn't hear the gate open, just the soft rustle of gravel and then Kellen's voice. "I brought wine," he said. I looked up. He held the bottle awkwardly, like a peace offering he wasn't sure I'd accept. "No meeting agenda?" I asked. He shook his head, a small smile forming. "No. Just me." We sat on the back bench, overlooking the roses. He poured into mismatched glasses I kept on the patio shelf. No ceremony, no fanfare. He didn't rush. "I used to think leadership meant being the loudest in the room," he said. "Now I see it's about knowing when to speak and when to listen." I looked at him then. Really looked. The edge of defensiveness was gone. He wasn't my opponent anymore. "Thank you," he said. I didn't get it, but I do now. I nodded, not out of triumph, but peace. "You didn't humiliate me, Kellen," I said. "You freed me to speak." We sipped quietly, watching the light stretch across the garden. I thought of Sonia, of Clarabelle, of the young women who might one day sit at a table and know their value before anyone tries to take it from them. Sometimes being nothing means no one sees you coming, but it also means you have everything to reveal when the moment is right. And this time, I made sure the moment belonged to me.